And then as you guys can kind of deal with these other issues, the apologizing versus expressing outrage, unless there's one that resonates with any of the participants that really want to get started. And I changed my view, and so I can't see you guys react. There we go. Maybe.
Justin wants to.
We're recording.
Okay, yeah, Justin.
I apologize.
Oh, you're fine.
Welcome back to our calls. These are such a joy to be part of, even though they are kind of gut-wrenching and emotional. Tonight we have new guests, and they'll introduce themselves as they go. But we want to start with the question, how do we deal with racism in our own circles? And I wanted to toss this to Alicia for her first answer.
We've been kind of battling a little bit with the Latino community this week, and their reaction to a lot of the protesting that's happening. We have seen a lot of, well, what about us? What about the children in cages? Or that's not how you should be doing things. There seems to be a lot of, at this point, I wouldn't call them microaggressions because they're pretty they're pretty in your face, but it's been really disheartening and it's been really frustrating. We already know, Jesus and I already know that the Latino community really struggles with colorism and racism. And it's something that we've casually called people out on in the past. I've had girlfriends that I grew up with that are college educated that say things, well, you know how las negras are, you know how Black people are. And I'm like, no, I don't. What are you talking about? Or, people casually say like, oh, you got to be careful around those people. They say them to us because they think that we'll align with those ideas. But how to confront that racism has been kind of like slapping people in the face with it a little bit this week, and maybe it's coming out of my own frustration and anger. But I just kind of said things like, where was your outrage during women's rights protests? Where was your outrage during gun reform protests? You didn't have the same outrage about Latinos being left out when those protests were going on, but suddenly it's a problem with Black protests that's making you uncomfortable. So what's the real issue here? What's the real problem here? So I've been calling people out all week, and I think it's like finally putting people in spaces where they're uncomfortable and they're like, well, I can't be racist, I'm Mexican. Oh yes, you can. You can be very. And colorism is a whole nother discussion, a whole nother topic, but it's something I've been battling with all week. And when we first started these conversations, that's one of the first things I brought up, that's kind of Black and brown divide. I don't know if Jesus has anything that he wanted to add on that, but we've been kind of on the same page all week with our people.
Well, I just want to add, because Michelle knows a little bit about my background, but she doesn't know, the whole life story. I'm from Central Mexico, and most of my people, if they don't leave the town, they aren't exposed to anybody else. They're pretty much, it's a tiny town. So it's pretty much you grow up there, you live there, you die there. So, you don't get exposed to Asian, Black, other cultures. And we just so happen, to move and come here in 1990. And yeah, growing up, in East Dallas, you don't see a lot of, at least back then, Asian kids, Black kids, whatever color kids. But I was lucky to go to Harry Stone and, meet all these different cultures from all these kids from all these backgrounds and stuff. And I was just like, yeah, there's nothing wrong with these kids, just like me. So, kind of like, depending where, where you go to school sometimes helps, stuff like that. But I think we have brought this up in the past. It is on parents. It's on grandparents. It's on everybody. You don't believe what you believe, just because. Like somebody kind of feeds you these ideas, or you see them somewhere else, and then you start wondering, but somebody has to tell you this isn't right sometimes. And I think that's a huge problem, that not enough people are saying that's not right. Like we just kind of take it and go along and play along, but
to not be rude or to not be whatever, but I think we're like up to here
I mean, yeah, it's got to stop.
with our own people.
I don't get the sense that you are like not shy. You're pretty bold, but I can't imagine how tired you must be from like having the same conversation over and over again.
Well, it can be difficult with elders. We're very traditional when it comes to how we speak to our elders. So even in the formal language that we use with elders, we've had these conversations with colleagues before where if we're speaking to someone in Spanish in a mixed group of people, it's not to exclude someone, it's out of respect for that elder. So there's very rigid lines and rules with how we speak to our elders. And you know, our own parents will say things and we're just like, okay, how do we, you know, keep respectful lines, but call out our parents, you know? So there's very, and not just our parents necessarily, but older people that we work with. My grandfather, who was 102 and feminist, but terrified of Black people. I mean, it's just there's cultural like things that, and you know, they sound like excuses, but that's what we struggle with.
Thank you. I'd like to bring in Bhavani and then go to Karen Alexander.
Hi, everyone. I'd like to sort of tack on to what Alicia and Jesus are saying. Just a couple of points as someone also somewhere on the color spectrum and sort of struggling to establish my space and my, you know, my point of view. I don't think it's, in my opinion, it's quite about saying something is not right. When someone says, you know, something that is racist or abusive, it's naming it, you know, what is wrong about what was said. Like you, I come from a culture where you're not supposed to speak back to your elders. So I totally understand where Alicia is coming from. My struggle has been that, you know, when it comes to racism, many of the people that we're not supposed to speak back to, say they're in their 70s, 80s, or 90s, are still voting. And they're voting against me as a person of color. And so I think it's important to engage them rather than giving them a pass. Like I said the other day to Michelle, I'm no longer giving anyone a pass. In my opinion, the best way to call out something is to name it. You know, so when someone says something that is racist, to say, hey, you know what you just said? That's racist, not that that is offensive. The very fact that it is racist is offensive. The fact that it's sexist is offensive. So naming it maybe highlights the issue to that person.
Wow, thank you. I don't know if y'all could hear my teeth grinding when you said, and they're also voting. Just kidding. So Karen Alexander, how would you like to take this conversation?
So the question's asking how we should handle racism in our circles. And I know I'm still learning about it and I'm still on a learning curve. So when I talk to people, reasonable people, I try to express that it's a learning curve and that we all have to start from where we are. And on the other spectrum of that, there are some people that are, you're not going to get through to them. You're just not. And I've decided I just can't talk to those people. And I tried to have one of those hard conversations with a family member this week, and it made no sense to me. The whole back and forth was no sense. So I just can't talk to that person about it.
I see what you're saying. What I'd like to do is go to Brianna, and then we're going to switch to the another question with Tammy.
So I concur with everything that everybody's saying, but I'm going to come at this a little bit from a different angle as well, because I'm going to come at it from kind of the coaching side of it, which is one of the things I found, especially like with my peer group or with people that maybe not even our friends, but, you know, just acquaintances or people that you're around, whenever they say something that, especially like those underhanded, you know, those parts where it's not, because most often I think that's really where, at least for me personally, that's where I see it a lot, right? It'll be something that's not an overt statement that people don't necessarily recognize. As those are sometimes the hardest ones to deal with. And so yes, thank you, Michelle, for naming that for me, those microaggressions, those sleights of hand that and especially around phrases and terms that were more widely accepted back in the day, right? In certain groups. And so what I have found to be a little bit more useful for me personally, instead of calling it specifically out and saying like, oh, that is this, and naming it, it's instead posing it as a question and saying, so I'm not sure what you meant by that. Can you help me understand what that was? And kind of playing the card of like, oh, I need for you to come out and tell me what you meant by that. And oftentimes, if they're uncomfortable with it, like if they know that they said it, then it puts them on that part. Now they're going to have to say, oh, because I'm a racist jackass, that's why, or, you know, whatever the case is. Like all of a sudden it changes that perspective. Instead of me giving them the words and saying, this is what I think of, it kind of, and it also gives them the benefit of the doubt. You know, there are many people who, because they heard, you know, like Jesus was saying, they grew up not knowing other people. They grew up not understanding that this word is really not acceptable because of the history that comes behind it. And so they're just repeating something. And if you say, I'm not sure what that meant. And then they can say, I don't either, you know, and then you can offer in and kind of connect with them at that point and say, well, you know, here's how it makes me feel, or this is what, you know, my experience is with it. But I've found that that's been a little bit more comfortable for me personally, so that it's not quite so confrontational, but it's also kind of that, oh, bless your heart, let's talk about this a little bit and kind of break it down in that way.
Yeah, in Spanish we say, te haces pendeja. You play the dumb card. You're like, oh, well, I don't quite understand that. Like, you know, you do a little side dog, like, you know, like confused face, like, oh, can you explain that to me? You know, so yeah, I get what you're saying.
Thank you. An actionable item. So now I want to shift to the question, how does a person shift to being anti-racist? And we want to welcome our new member, Tammy.
Yeah, so thank you for letting me join. This has already been just so incredible for me. This question I'm super passionate about, mainly because probably in the last 2 years has this term become something that I found was real. I didn't recognize that there was racist or non-racist, and the anti-racist term over the last couple of years has become more known, and I still feel like so many people don't know. And so becoming an anti-racist is opposing racism. And I think for a lot of white people, especially my age and where I grew up, almost the word racism and racist was kind of like a bad word. We don't talk about that. Like, you know, the extremist is where you go. When you talk about white supremacy, you think KKK. You don't think those implicit biases, those things that are deep down in us. And so I think speaking out about anti-racism is what a lot of us are needing right now, because we're learning that when you don't speak up on behalf of the oppressed, you become an oppressor as well. By not being an anti-racist, you are being silenced to what is happening. And so becoming an anti-racist is opposing racism. It's to be active in speaking out against racism. And one statement that I have learned in this process of doing my own work comes from a curriculum that I've used called Be the Bridge. And it states that it is helpful to think of this work as a spirit-led inner rearrangement of categories, assumptions, values, and beliefs. So doing this work of becoming an anti-racist is going to affect every area of your life. right? You're going to be dismantling things that you were not even on your radar at all, because it's such an inner work. You'll be required to be open and humble. You'll be required to listen, really, really listen, like close your mouth and listen. You'll be required to take risks and to stay committed even when it gets hard. You'll also be required to disconnect from privilege and power, which a lot of white people still just don't get and understand, the privilege that we carry and the power that comes just because of our skin color. And so recognizing we are all full of implicit biases, which is also known as implicit social cognition, and refers to the attitudes, the stereotypes that affect our understanding, actions, and decisions in an unconscious manner. I give a lot of definition because I feel that's what's worked for me, is really knowing a lot of these things and defining them. But there are beliefs deep down inside of us that we are yet to be aware of. You know, there are things that when I say you're going to have to do a lot of inner work and a lot of heart work, that's what we're talking about. It's those things that are so deep down that we are yet to be aware of them hidden in us. And I would say the number one thing is going to be educate, educate, educate. Find every resource you can, right? Everything that talks about your race and learning about racism is going to be super important. But also we have got to, I can't stress enough, the listening to the people of color that are in our lives and believing them, because your instinct so often will be to not. Your instinct sometimes will be to seek facts or figures to bolster this view that they have. And you'll tell them that what they say is just really in their imagination. And our goal as white people is to listen and resist all of that at all cost, and truly hear them and hear what they're saying, taking a listening posture, seek to serve them, seek to elevate their voice and not yours. So part of what I'm learning too with some of my friends of color is they've asked me, hey, could you just say that to that other white person for me? Because I don't think they believe me. And so that's elevating the voices of our friends of color and using our privilege in a new sphere of influence. Being silent on the topic of racism really only continues to oppress. And so becoming an anti-racist should be goal, not just a non-racist. And I don't know if Levi had anything to add to that.
Yeah, she's, you can see why I married her, can't you? So great job, honey. The only thing I would add, just as I was thinking about this question, is submitting to a mentor and leadership of someone who's not like me. And so as a white male, I'm used to reading books by white authors, submitting to leaders that are white and male, and just finding mentors, people who are not like me, and submitting to their leadership, submitting to their perspective, and honoring who they are. And in my perspective, a lot of times has been different, and that's hard for me. And so I'm wrestling through that. But so that's one thing that I've tried to do other than what she said.
What you said about mentoring, there is an idea that you can have a mentor for a specific purpose, not just your career, not just, getting through school. But if you're just like, this year, I want to do this one thing, and you are the person that I've picked to help me with that. And so they're not supposed to save you from everything, but just that one topic. There are so many comments on this, but we want to shift to CJ, Jennifer, Alicia, and then Bhavani. Oh, and sorry, Bhavani had a question for Tammy, please. So Bhavani, if you'll go ahead and ask your question.
Justin said he wanted to add something. So if you want, I can go after Justin and CJ and all the others. I don't mind.
Okay. Then I think I've got my speakers list wrong. Is it Justin or CJ who needs to talk next?
I think it might be me. I don't know.
Let's go with. Oh, I see. It's Justin. CJ was saying something else, and then so we'll go Justin. Justin, thank you.
All right. So again, thanks. Thanks for having me, everybody. This is awesome. I really appreciate this. So based on what we're talking about, it's funny because I get asked that a lot. I've been asked by numerous, it's always generally white guys that ask me, what can I do as far as like, how do I become an anti-racist? The first thing that I tell them, like the absolute first thing you have to do is you have to get to a place in your mind where you understand that you have internalized, I'm 38, so you have internalized myself 38 years of racist ideas, beliefs, biases, you name it. So I tell them you have to identify it with yourself first. You cannot go out and go, I'm anti-racist, and now I'm going to tell everybody how they're racist. That never works. It's not, you can't deny something, and you can't deny something that exists within yourself and expect to change it in other people, because every single person, and I can speak for only white people, every single white person has racist tendencies. And I heard a speech one time, I heard a guy talk one time that said, it doesn't make you a racist, but every single person, and it was 100% white, the school, every single person has racist tendencies. So get over that. And once you start identifying that in every single thing that you do, what do you see when you look out your window? What do you see in your house? What do you see? Not only privilege, what are you thinking? What ways do you benefit from it? You have to get to that point. Then you can move on to the next step of identifying racist and trying to dismantle it. But once we identify within ourselves, because then I know and I can talk to people and say, hey, yes, you don't use the N-word, and you posted a heart on Black Lives Matter. That's great. Now let's talk about how you benefit. Let's talk about everything that we can. Then we'll move on to be, you know, I get people that say, I don't want to just be an anti-racist today. I want to be an abolitionist. I actually heard that the other day. And I'm like, I know the most dedicated civil rights people will not call themselves abolitionists. Like you need to start with the first A, and that's just, you know, accountability for your own racist tendencies, right? I just completely made up that A, by the way. Not bad for on the spot. But yeah, I just wanted to say that because I do get asked that a lot, especially where I'm at. So I don't know if y'all know, I'm in Richmond, Virginia. I don't know if we have any other Virginia people around here. But I get asked that a lot. People look at me and assume I'm on the other side. They either assume I'm like an alt-right guy, or they assume I'm an undercover cop. So I get asked questions a lot, and I have to justify. And so my first thing is I will tell you, I have racist tendencies. And I have not reached the set. I would love to say that I am a complete anti-racist, but that's a really hard thing for any white person to say, because in our everyday life, we're benefiting from some sort of racist structure. So.
That is intense. Bhavani, do you have a question for Tammy or Justin?
Yes, actually for Tammy, and for Justin, both. I think, Justin, you raised some fantastic points. Both of you did. The question I have is, you know, as someone who is empowered, as someone who is a feminist, and, you know, the point that you raised about all of us having implicit biases, spot on, Tammy. I think we all do. And we're conditioned by it. And so it's a constant pushback against our own conditioning. What I would like to know from you guys is, you know, it's one thing to speak up. I look at Michelle, I look at Alicia, I look at Shawana, I look at myself, and I go, hey, we're strong, powerful women of color. We can speak up for ourselves. And it's great to have allies who speak up with us, not for us. So that's one thing. And the other point I want to, the question I have is, how do you tell people, and because I've been seeing a lot of mostly white people who've said, when you say Black Lives Matter, all lives matter, blue lives matter, and they bring these things in, and it pisses me off, because that's not what we're talking about right now. And so how do you talk those people down off the ledge at the same time that you're speaking up with people of color, not for, but with them? I don't know if that makes sense.
I will let them answer that. Tammy, do you have a response for that? I'll let you guys think about that for a second. Jennifer, did you have anything that you wanted to add to this part of the conversation?
Sorry. I was just going to add something I saw, and everybody's Facebook is blowing up, and everybody, much like he just said, is posting quotes and posting the blackout and things like that, and which just ultimately is extremely shallow. It doesn't feel like, and maybe they're going to marches, but I don't know that anybody's actually, or few people, I would guess, are going to do the hard work that it's going to take to really make a change. And I saw this today on Facebook, and it was the one that sort of made me pause the most. And it's a Martin Luther King quote, and it's kind of long, so I won't read it all. But it's he says, "I've been gravely disappointed with the white moderate." The stumbling block basically is not the Ku Klux Klaner, but the white moderate who's more devoted to order than justice. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. And I feel like that's what I have been. That's what most of the people that I know that are good people have been. And I guess I'm being the negative Nelly, because I don't know that people are going to do the hard work it's going to take. That's all.
Yes, I can see what you mean about the hard work. Sorry, let's get to Alicia and then Brianna, and then we'll go back to Justin and Tammy to talk about Bhavani's question.
My comment was part of Justin and Tammy's response. And I believe what both of y'all said. And I go back to the point where, when we're kids and we're growing up, I can tell you right now, I don't remember just being mean to kids for no reason, you know what I mean? Being a kid, you're, as they say, pure. And it's almost like the adults around us mess us up along the way. So it's almost like we have to go back now as adults, whether we're, 40, 50, 60, kind of go back to that point all over again. It's like, what made me believe what I believe now, or, all of that nonsense? Because it is nonsense, and it's almost just hatred that, some of us might be carrying for whatever reason. So I know last week we brought up the point, like, do parents educate the kids on this? Do teachers? I'm gonna say everybody. Like, I know the 22 kids in my class are not mine that I bring home. To tell you the truth, I spend a lot of time with them. So if they're not gonna get it from home, then I'll take it. We talk about everything. It is a Montessori setting, so we talk about the most random thing at times. So I feel that it is part of my job now, it always has been. But I agree with Justin to the point where if we admit our own faults, then that's a good starting point, what do I believe that I know is not right? I might say it's just pure injustice, we keep seeing. So if we just start with that, like, this isn't right, and it's just people are not getting a fair share, then we go from there. So it's just, there's many issues and many distractors as well. Let's stop focusing on distractors. There's looting, yes, we get it. You know, that there's this, there's that. Of course, there's always something that they're going to throw at you, so you can stop the riots and stop the protesting and stop the talks and stop the argument. So I mean, there's always going to be something coming your way. That was it.
I'm sorry, what did you say about justice?
Yeah, I mean, it's if we focus on the fact that what's happening to a lot of these people is just, you know, injustice and just not right, for example. Where it's
Yeah.
like I mean, just not just the police officer, for
Right.
example. I mean, if anything happens where it's like one person gets 3 months in jail for, let's say, taking a life,
Mm-hmm.
but then another person gets 10 years in jail because they hire the right attorney and they have the right amount of money. And the kid here in Texas who, because he blamed it on his upbringing, I mean, he was pretty much off the hook because it's like, hey, this is what this is how I was brought up. I never was taught responsibility. I'm like, seriously? But I mean, like, it's like some people can get off and some people just don't. So I mean, there's tons of examples out there where this happens year after year after year, pretty much.
Yes, very good. Now we want to shift to Brianna, please.
So I will say that for me personally, I mean, I completely can identify with where these conversations, everything that everybody's been going in here. I know for me personally, I really, up until the last probably 6 months, did not truly, even though I do a lot of work in this, understand truly the difference between, oh, I'm not a racist versus anti-racist. And I think part of it is because there's always quote unquote new words and buzzwords and all of this stuff, right? And it was okay, is this just something else that's out there and all of that? And I know I shared it in our chat, but I'm gonna read a couple parts from Peggy McIntosh's article over unpacking white privilege, unpacking the invisible knapsack, specifically because for me as a white woman, I understand very intimately the gender issues that are out there, right? Like I understand what it's like to be the only woman in a room with all men, and the scarcity of the table that has been created around gender issues, and also the scarcity of the table that's now that has always been there around racial issues as well. And so I think for me personally, reading this article really brought a lot of it together, and it's going to echo some of the things that have already been said. But the article in itself starts out with a quote from Peggy McIntosh that says, "I was taught to see racism only in individual acts of meanness, not in invisible systems conferring dominance on my group." And I think that that's really important, because when we hear the word racist, immediately the images of the Ku Klux Klan and white supremacist is what pops up into everybody's mind. And if you don't use those words or you don't identify with that group, then you immediately say, well, I'm not a racist. I know better than to do those kind of things. But we don't break it apart enough to really understand the systems that are in play. And so she goes on to say, that she's often noticed men's unwillingness to grant that they are overprivileged, even though they may grant that women are disadvantaged. They may say that they are willing to work on women's statutes in the society, the university, or the curriculum, but they can't or won't support the idea of lessening men's, right? Like it's the power balance. And I know we've talked about that a lot of, I'm willing to let you have the ubiquitous I and you, right? Of I'm willing to let you have more rights as long as it doesn't take my power away, right? Like we don't want to reverse anything, because heaven forbid that would just throw everything off, right? And so she then goes on to say, denials amount to taboos surround the subjective advantages that men gain from women's disadvantages. These denials protect male privilege from being fully acknowledged, lessened, or ended. Thinking through unacknowledged male privilege as a phenomenon, I realized that since hierarchies in our society are interlocking, they are most likely a phenomenon. And I realized that since hierarchies in our society, that white privilege was similarly denied and protected. As a white person, I realized that I had only been taught about racism, as something that puts others at a disadvantage, but had not been taught to see it as one of corollary aspects white privilege indeed puts me at an advantage. And so I think, where she goes on through this to talk about how my schooling gave me no training in seeing myself as an oppressor, as an unfairly advantaged person, or as a participant in a damaged culture. I was taught to see myself as an individual whose moral state depended upon her individual moral will. My schooling followed the pattern my colleague Elizabeth Minnick has pointed out. Whites are taught to think of their lives as morally neutral, normative, and average, and also ideal, so that when we work to benefit others, this is seen as the work that will allow them to be more like us, right? And so I think that I break part of this apart because words really, really mean a lot. And I think the word privilege, I was raised to believe that the word privilege means like you were born with a silver spoon in your mouth and you had everything given to you. And so these words are so hard for so many white people to process where they feel into it. And so there's so much resistance that comes into that. So all of that to say, I think that where we really get down to that is and I think, what Jennifer was talking about as well is it's hard to not, sorry, let me scratch that part, but say like the difference for me between I'm not a racist versus I am an anti-racist is that action piece that moves forward with it, right? So then how can we go beyond looking past things? And I think that that's where it starts to get a little bit difficult. And I will push back on, I don't want to be too quick to judge the events that are happening right now with people. I think we should celebrate that people are having conversations. I think we should support that people are liking the heart. I think that we should encourage that to continue to happen. So it's just like, when you're potty training or when you're having your kids sleep through the night, like you celebrate that first step and then you keep going and you want to encourage them to get to that next piece and that next piece and that next piece. Because if we say what you're doing is not enough, then they're not ever going to see that they can be enough. And so we have to be very deliberate in making sure that we're seeing that progress. Is it going to fix it all in a day? Absolutely not. But we have to, I think in my mind, to answer part of Bhavani's question, which is, how do we help stand with instead of for? It's to keep those conversations happening continually with it, instead of it being like, oh, here I'm here to speak for this, and here was my checkbox that I can kind of work through. So I'm going to kind of sit back and let that keep going. There's so much that we can unpack around this conversation. It's hard to kind of keep it all in.
Yeah, there's we've gotten a lot into just words and the details of words, but like I am not a racist versus the more active I am an anti-racist. I'm trying to think of a framework that might work with that. Like I am not drowning versus I am a good swimmer. Like, okay, not drowning. Now we're going to go to Tammy or Justin, whoever would like to start with follow up on earlier questions.
I can go ahead and go. I agree that, words and definitions are definitely important for white people right now. I mean, for all of us really, so we know we're all on the same page, but we're more unaware, I think, when it comes to becoming an anti-racist. A great resource, there's a book, it's called How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi. I don't know if I'm saying his name right. Incredible. So many definitions. And so it's really demystifying some words that we once had this idea of what it was and bringing it to what the true definition is. But to go to the questions earlier, so how do we talk to our friends that are saying all lives matter? It really reveals the heart of the person you're talking to. So you have to be gentle to some degree, but really I've used a few different terms, right? So I have 3 kids, and if my youngest comes to me and says, I'm super hungry, I really need something to eat, I didn't get breakfast, and I didn't eat my lunch at school, but then I turn and I feed my 2 older kids instead of her, then I'm really tending to something that's not necessarily important. It's something like, we know all lives matter. That's simple. But when we're talking about the need and the oppression and the fact that not all people are believing that Black Lives Matter, that they seem to be disposable to certain groups of people in our world, that when we show all lives matter, we're tending to something that's not a question right now. This is not a question that's being asked. And so what we need to do is address the questions that are being asked right now. Does my life matter as a Black man? Am I important? Do you see me? We need to be addressing that, and we need to respond with, you matter. Yes, your life matters. Black lives are important to our country, and we need them, and they're necessary for us as a country to move forward. But if we just keep tending to things that aren't an issue, then we're never going to resolve what the true issue is. That's a big
Nope.
news.
I hear you on that. There's a matrix that you use, urgent versus important, and all lives are important, but Black lives right now in this moment is both urgent and important. So I see what you're saying about, yeah. And if you have anything else to add, keep going.
Just the other question that was asked about speaking up on behalf of or speaking with or for that, those two different words. So I'll give an example. So we have in the last year, a friend of mine, well, there's a group of us, we've started a coalition for dismantling racism in our community. And my friend, who is a person of color, she is our president, and I sit as the vice president. And we've had some white people in our coalition that have kind of give pushback, or their fragility kind of shows up in conversations. And so she came to me and said, hey, I need you to, some specific things. I need you to elevate my voice on this. I need you to speak to this, because right now, these few people aren't hearing me. And so it goes back to the truly listen and believe everything our friends of color are telling us, that not all people are there yet, and they want to kind of rebuttal or get facts on, which is not necessary. And so it's not that she's saying, let me sit in the corner and you go and speak for me, but she's just saying, I need you to partner with me. I need you to elevate my voice on this. And when I give an example, I just need you to support me in that and use your voice in that moment, so that they don't begin quickly to just judge me or want all the facts and to go deeper into the conversation. And so she is definitely a strong woman, and she uses her voice, but she's asked me to partner with her. And really it's that privilege as a white person that we elevate the voices, of the people of color. So it's repeating what they're saying, it's recognizing it, and it's choosing to take part in their conversation, but from their lens and not from my bias or my ideas, but using their words. I don't know if that helps, or if that, okay.
Yes, there's lots of feedback on the chat about this. Yeah, and now we'll send it to Justin.
Oh, all right. So real quick, because I know I feel like CJ keeps trying to chime in, and I feel bad. So anyways, I think what you were saying, Bhavani, about how do you, like, being an anti-racist, but also, like, how do you let people know? So what I have done, it's not really only with anti-racism. It's also, I started in basically the social justice movement years ago. So I throw everything out the window when it comes to caring what anyone thinks about me, or losing friends, or making friends. I'm also big in the LGBTQ community. My sister is lesbian. She's been a lesbian for like 30 years, has 4 wonderful children. So that's kind of how I got into it, a little bit into that side. But I have draped myself in rainbow flags, gone to protest different churches that have come to town to to stand up. I've gone to Pride Fest, but and that's related. I've gone to women's marches, the Women's March on Washington with my wife. And I guess what I'm saying is you've got to be, and I'm talking to everyone on this call, y'all don't have to do any of this. This is just what I've found for me. I don't really sit back. I like to be on the front lines. We have a Black Lives Matter giant sign on the front of our house right now that we just put up after I went to a march yesterday. And we have already noticed a difference. We live on a all white street. They're up the road having a party right now. We're sitting on the front porch. We feel like they won't even talk to us. That's the area that I'm in, but that's not anyone that I want to be associated with. So they know where I stand. They see me. I'm very vocal about it. So I guess to answer your question, Bhavani, there's no question to me where I stand. I let people know. Whoever I am trying to either stand with or stand up for, which is kind of like your upstander thing. I absolutely am committed to that. There is no, well, this person's different or this person is this. It doesn't matter. I will do it real quick and then I'll hand it over. So the other thing is, so I'm the secretary for my NAACP group here in Chesterfield, right? And what you have to do, what I tell people, you have to go in there and shut up and let the leadership lead. One of the issues that I've seen with a lot of white people is they say, I want to get involved, and they show up and they go, well, I want to do this and I want to say this and then let's do this. And there's a takeover mentality. It's a control because again, that's one of the tendencies that we have. It is a racist tendency based on our race as being white because we have always been in control. And so what I tell people is go in there, and I'm not being mean, but shut up, sit down. You're there to support. You're there to stand with. You're not there to lead. You can take a role and that's great, but you are not there to take over. So I'm talking about white people, obviously. So I think it's just, it's getting involved that way. And Brianna, real quick, I think that you made a good point about, I'm in another group too, that we had a discussion with on Tuesday about that, and it's like 90% female, the group. And they were all telling me, and I heard feedback, Justin, if we're comfortable writing a post or hitting like or doing a heart, then that's what they're comfortable with. And I said, you know what? That's fine. If that's your thing, if that's what you're comfortable with, I'm in no way saying you've got to go do what I do out in the street. But if you're comfortable with that and you're making a statement, by all means, but what we got to do is keep the momentum going. After you hit that heart or after you post the Malcolm X quote, I want to see you next week at our NAACP meeting, and I want to see you at a march, and I want to see the organizations that you begin to stand up with. So that's great that we do that online, but then we need to keep the momentum going.
And now we move into our final speaker, which is CJ, who's been waiting 45 minutes to talk.
So the funny thing is actually I told so I work with Dr. Neely. And I told her when she invited me to do this that I didn't want to talk, that I just wanted to listen. And then like earlier, I'm like, okay, I want to talk. And I think she knew that was going to happen. But I think a few things. I love that you have to listen and learn. And I think everything that has to come out of whatever is going to be for whatever marginalized group there might be. In this case, obviously, there's a focus on Black people. And I think whatever you do needs to come out of love. And I'll tell you, like for me, I'm still trying to figure out and process. And I tell Dr. Neely every day at work, I'm like, hey, I'm still processing. Here's where I'm processing. Tell me what I need. And I don't remember, because it was probably like 6 hours ago, that someone mentioned the mentorship. But I think mentorship is great. And luckily, I have somebody that came on board to work with me. And I think really she knew that she would come on board to mentor me, because she knew that, hey, I have a heart for people and I have this good heart. But I was raised in a very Hispanic/white community out in West Texas. And I think I grew up with like 2 black kids, and they were very much like country and almost assimilated to the white culture because they didn't necessarily have anything different. And so coming to Dallas after meeting now Dr. Neely years ago at Barack Obama, she's kind of always taken me under her wing and made sure that, hey, I'm going to challenge you, and I'm going to just slide these things in there. And so I think the mentorship is huge. And I think, Jennifer, I'm going to challenge you when I think you said, something to the effect of, you're not sure how many people were willing to do the work. Well, I'm going to raise my hand. Like, I'm a principal at a junior high of predominantly children of color, and I'm doing the work every day. Actually, I'm handing the work over to Dr. Neely and saying, hey, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? What do you want to do? How can I support? Where do I need to send you? What's the training that we need to bring in for our teachers? Oh, wait, I don't need to pay for training. Actually, you want to come in. I'm sitting there texting her during this, and she's like, hey, I met Brianna Hodges at TCEA where you sent me. I'm like, no, that was fair size D tax dollars that sent you to this. And now we're spiraling back. And she's like, well, let's bring Brianna in. She'll teach it with me, and she'll be my voice. And then and so it's awesome to see all these things that come about, all because we just want to learn. And we have a love for people, and we don't just have a love for a certain person, but we have to develop that love. And obviously, as a white person, there are racist tendencies probably obviously within me, and I have to raise my hand and say, hey, they're there, and I'm still trying to learn what those are. And some of them I'm learning, and I think we all have to do that as a community of people that want to get better. And at our school, the motto is embrace your opportunity for growth. Well, there's a pretty big opportunity for growth right here, and not just for me and the children, but across the country. And so I'm committed to my role as an educator. I told Dr. Neely, I said, I'm not the dude probably that's going to step out on a protest, mainly because I'm tired when I get home from work, from doing all this stuff. But I said, Dr. Neely, what do we need to do? Like, how can we affect the 630 kids and the 82 staff members in our school to go out and spread the good word? We are going to get better. And social justice doesn't happen overnight, unfortunately. And as I talk to some of my buddies and we walk through and try to materialize and I don't have big words like the rest of you guys, so I'm not real good at that. And if I do throw one out, I probably don't know how to spell it. But I think how do we work through that? And I think what I've come to is as much as I want it to happen overnight, it doesn't. And as much as I want to know everything tomorrow, and Dr. Neely, plug into my brain, I'm hoping that like Apple or Microsoft or Google can develop something that just like plug in and make me better, but they can't. So what we have to do, that cycle, is education. And if you haven't read a book by Damon Lopez, if you haven't read anything by him, his biggest quote that I love is, the only cycle greater than the cycle of poverty is the cycle of education. And I think many of you touched on how education is so important. And it's greater than any cycle, the cycle of racism, systemic marginalism, of any marginalized group. Education's how you get past that. And I have to educate you, and then hopefully you get a little smarter and educate the next generation, and then hopefully you get a little smarter and educate the next generation. And protests, and even though I don't want to see a small business burn, that may be what needs to happen to expedite that process. And I think we have to be okay with that. And I think at the beginning we talked about, what it was like to to talk to maybe your older parents or even a grandparent, if you're lucky enough at our age to have them still living. It's hard to tell them to change at age 80 and 90, right? But you also don't want to necessarily hear it. And so one of my favorite quotes is preach the gospel every day, and if necessary, use words. And with some people, the words don't matter. They just have to see you. And they have to see that you are going to do better. And they're going to see that you don't react to what they say. Maybe it's an off-color joke. And you just ignore it if they're maybe a little older. Now, if they're my age, I get to speak up and I can say, hey, we know better. We weren't raised in maybe a different time. And I think the biggest thing that I've learned, and I had read some research on diversity and how interracial relationships, what those do to your brain. And if you haven't looked any of that up, the brain research of what interracial relationships do on the brain and why this goes beyond just a relationship, but why America can be so great is that when you have conflicting ideas, your brain can actually choose the better one versus just what you were taught. So when you have true relationship with people, not only do you get better, but then you have a child that is better, and then they maybe don't see it. And obviously we all want to have that face of a child. So as a white person, why do white people keep building these little communities of white people, and you might know them as suburbs, where they say, "Ooh, we're going to go parson ourselves off from whatever that is so we can protect our kids." Protect your kids from what? From different? From better? If I told you, hey, your kid could have a better brain by living here and experiencing this and knowing that, would you change your mind on where you live? And so those are my thoughts. So hopefully the end is going out. I just saw boom. So Dr. Neely, I hope I didn't embarrass you, but that's my thoughts, and I've gotten to do nothing but learn, and I appreciate everything that you guys have taught me tonight, because it's really, really exciting for me to get to take this back and impart it on the 700 or 632 kids and 82 staff members that we can affect life with.
Thank you. That was an exciting note. I am smiling so big because a couple days ago, Michelle was telling me how she ended up in Ferris. And she said, this guy, I worked with him at this other school, and he's got to be principal of this. And yeah, sure, I'll come work with you. And that's just a huge boost of confidence for both of y'all. And I can definitely see why she would be interested in running the school with y'all. And of course, as someone from Waxahachie, I'm super excited that you're doing something amazing in Ferris. They're working on the money for you. The difference between yard signs and social media was brought up. Both are interesting and important. Of course, a yard sign opens you up to in-person trolling or damage to your property. So there's always that piece, but we've got to work that out. And social media has different impacts. Some of y'all live in very close communities. I certainly do. In the Georgia 6th, everybody remembers everything. So you just have to be, you can get trapped if you're afraid to step out because of economic impact. And on that note, I will close it out. Thank you. You guys are amazing.
Oh, hold on a second. Shawana wants to say
How about Shawana?
Oh my gosh, Shawana, I'm so sorry.
Just to make sure that we're clear, everybody, we had I don't know which invite it was, but I asked for an additional 15 minutes. Are y'all okay with that? Yeah? Okay. So if you're okay with the 15 minutes, we'll keep on going. So Shawana, you jump in, and then
sorry.
And then can we go to the question about the difference between peacemakers and peacekeepers after that? After Shawana?
Yes.
All right, cool.
Let's do that, Shawana.
Now, Shawana, you're frozen now. So you waited all this time and now you're frozen?
So we're going to come back to her in a moment. Let's explore this idea of peacekeeper versus peacemaker, which is a beatitude and tough to accomplish. Michelle, you're passionate about this, but does anybody else want to jump in on this?
I'm gonna defer to whoever wants to mention it, and if no one wants to pick it up, then I'll come in and talk about peacemakers versus peacekeepers.
I think Adrian just said he would.
Oh, go ahead, Adrian.
Thank you. I guess that was. Go ahead, baby. No, my computer's moving really slow for some weird reason. So I'm blaming racism. But like, you guys have actually made me think of some other things. Like when I was listening to Justin talk about the LGBTQ community, because on the first couple of questions, I got really cocky and I was like, oh, I'm good there, but then I was listening to Justin, and I had a lot of LGBTQ students at my community, at the community college I taught at, and they just clung to me. And I was always wondering, I always thought about, because I had a friend when I used to work on movies, and one of his things was the first, I think the first 2 weeks of shooting, we didn't talk, and he would pass by, and he just always kind of gave me this funny look, and he'd keep going. And so we finally talked one day, and he was like, "Hey, you're all right." And I was like, "Yeah, why wouldn't I be all right?" And he said, Black people and gay people don't exactly have the best history. And I was like, oh, I guess I can't be mad at that thought, But lately with my LGBTQ students, when I was thinking about when you guys were talking about being non-racist versus anti-racist, I feel like that's the same thing that I've been trying to process, as far as being just not homophobic to being anti-homophobic. So I sat here that whole time and was listening and learning, and just I really appreciate what was said about in regards to that, because I think that can cross different lines. Especially it did with me. But when it comes to being a which one we on first? Peacemaker, peacekeeper, right? We were on peacekeeper first. And I've learned a lot about that this week, about myself in that regard, because I always thought I was pretty good at both peacekeeping and peacemaking. I thought I could deal with that and bring certain people together in a group, and we could all be cool, and I could be the glue guy. But what I've learned this week is that I have a lot to learn in that area as well, because to be a peacemaker or a peacekeeper, you have to understand, I believe, how much you can take. Because I was, and I guess social media, unfortunately, is kind of the best way to talk about it in the microcosm, because we're not face to face, and we're not, right, especially right now. And so you can't see people, you can't see context, you can't see intent, you can't hear intent, you can't get any of those things from what people are saying when they're talking. And we've had some interesting conversations. Michelle can attest to that on my Facebook page, because I can say things sometimes, and I try to say them in such a way and be fair to all involved. But then lately I've realized that my patience is shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. And there would be a couple of All Lives Matter people. I can kind of deal with that. I can deal with the All Lives Matter. But then I know that the area where I'm kind of I need more work is when somebody brings up, well, what has Trump done wrong, or something like that. And then suddenly I'm like, well, let me tell you what he's done wrong. I can't, it's not the same energy that I was just giving to the other people. And so I learned with some people, I can exhibit a little patience depending on their tone and how they come at it. But I've had a couple of people who have been more vociferous, and then I'm finding out that maybe we weren't, our relationship wasn't what I thought it was, most definitely. And after a certain point, to kind of maintain, at least if we're going to talk about these things, and I look at that from my Black friends too, because I have some friends that come in on 11, like on Spinal Tap, and it's like, we take it to 11. I have some friends that come in on that when we have conversations and somebody mentioned Trump, and they're like, look, mother, I'm like, hey, man, this is somebody I work with, or this is my friend, and they need to learn. They don't understand yet this part of it and why this bothers you so much. So, hey, they can still pick things up if you don't come, like a bull in a china shop and knock everything down. They're asking because they actually are interested. I know this person, I have a relationship with this person. And then with those that aren't, I've learned that sometimes they just the people that aren't on both sides, sometimes I've learned that maybe they just don't need to be a part of the conversation. Like if you can't reach everybody, but there are people that are reachable, you have to create a space that makes it okay for those people to ask, whether it be in person or it be online. So I've kind of, that's my contribution to the peace kind of keeper, is that when people are coming in, you have to learn who's really, yeah, Jesus, lately I've just been telling people flat out, like, you know, you can unfriend me if you want. I'm not going to unfriend you because I'm petty, really. It's not really for any righteous reason. It's just so they can constantly see comments I make that upset them. But I've learned that sometimes you keep some people around and you try to like look at your own, like, where's that point where I don't know if I can keep it going. And then, no, it's too late, baby, I did it. And so I have to look at where I am, my own biases, my own thought processes, and how, if I'm being a negative part of that conversation, at the same time, when we are in conversations, if I can kick a negative person out of the conversation because they're driving other people out, sometimes I do. Like, I'm like, you don't need to be a part of this conversation because you can't come in without guns ablazing. So I think those are just things that I've noticed, especially recently, I've had to deal with.
Thank you. The framework for looking at this in the lens, the same lens that we deal with the LGBT issues is it's a good resource for us, because we can look at that and say, this is how we deal with this. And some of what you said, Adrian, is like the Seinfeld approach, you know, not that there's anything wrong with that, but then they don't do anything else. So I'll leave that. Now we get to go to Shawana. We're looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Well, after Google Meet kicked me out, just went on to my phone because the computer wouldn't let me back in. But to just kind of bookend, starting where Alicia and Jesus started when they were talking about the older family and as listening to everyone else, and how today received a phone call going to pick up some food for my husband and I. My father called, and I've had a couple of hours to process what he was trying to tell me, in that, you know, my dad is 86 years old, and with all of my travels and the people that I bring through my family's house and meet my parents, because everybody always wants to say, well, who are your parents? We need to meet them, or let's meet, you know, these Willises who have produced the child like you. And I was like, okay. And mainly because I am that person that's willing to be accepting and listen and hear people out. My father gives me a call. He's like, hey, what are you doing? Thanks for, you know, fussing at me yesterday because he was outside working in the heat of the day, and he's 86 years old. I'm like, dude, you have to take better care of yourself. But he said, I just want you to know that I hear you when you say, listen to people first, and then not make an assumption, but to hear them out and push them to say more to you. He went on a store run, and another middle-aged Caucasian gentleman said, I'm sure you need help with that, sir. Let me help you. And my dad was like, I think I can handle it. I'm able-bodied. And he said, but you know what? Since you're wanting to be nice, sure, you can help me. So my father allowed someone that he normally probably would not have allowed to assist him in something, because he said, you constantly push me in my home to think outside of the box in which I was raised. And I was like, oh, wow, Dad, that's awesome. I'm glad to hear you say that. And he was like, I just want you to know, he said, I pay attention. I listen to you guys. And he said, but understand that it's harder. It is hard for me because I pay more attention to action than words. So since he wanted to act on something, I allowed him to act. And he said, and we had a short conversation and it was pleasant. And he said, I didn't ask him why he wanted to help me. I just let him do it. And he said, I'm listening. And he said, I'm starting to pay more attention to what you and your sister have been sharing with me. And my sister and I tease each other because we feel as though our parents raised us in this social experiment, because our whole street was completely diverse. And I was one of those people who bought into the I don't see color But actually I did because I appreciated my friends for who they were and what their backgrounds were. And I had to self-correct myself in that. It's like, no, I do. And I appreciate you for your color or your culture, because I want you to appreciate me for mine. Going back to the golden rule of treating people the way you want to be treated. So hearing Justin is like, how long is this going to take? I want it to happen now. I've been challenging my father since I got here 48 years ago. He swears by. I think the first couple of years is a wash. I think he can give me that. But at today, to receive that phone call, it is a life work. And sometimes it's, a small group, and then let that small group infect those around you. But to have my dad hang around with his buddies, in the coming weeks, whenever he gets a chance to, or talk to them on the phone, I'm curious to see what those conversations are going to be, because I plan on asking him, like, what was your conversation like this time when you talked to Mr. Willie, or when you talked to Mr. Robert? What was that conversation like now versus, what I know of my dad being the person that he is, but he's also a 86-year-old African-American man that's been shaped by his experiences from 1934 up until now. So it takes time. I encourage everybody that's on this call to continue in the work that you are doing to educate yourself and those around you, because it's not easy, especially when it's people in your own family, and you're taught to respect your elders, and you don't talk back, or you don't challenge them on that. But luckily, my parents raised somebody who learned to start challenging in the home and there was a little breakthrough today. And I just wanted to share that with everyone, that even though it doesn't happen overnight, it does happen. And that's that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, well worth the wait. Michelle, go ahead.
All right. So I want to just kind of close with the thought process around peacemakers. So, for me as a Christian, the idea of peacemakers comes from the Beatitudes. Is something you learn in Vacation Bible School, although no child has the privilege of going to Vacation Bible School right now. And it's just to read scripture, it is, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the sons of God. And but by definition, apart from the scripture, the definition of a peacemaker is one who brings about peace, especially by reconciling adversaries. And so, to go a little bit further and a little deeper, the term reconcile has some very key words. It has restoration, coexist, and transaction in the definition. And as a peacemaker, it's going to be really important whether you're a white peacemaker, a brown peacemaker, a black peacemaker, a peacemaker that's on two wheels, a peacemaker on your deathbed, whatever your role is as a peacemaker, it is one where you're going to have to restore. So you have to deal with people's hurt. You have to accept that they're hurt. You have to accept that they have differences, and that takes patience. You have to choose to coexist. We can't cut people off. People don't deserve to be cut off. They're human, right? And then transaction means that we have to continually go back and chip away at this the lack of peace in the lives of others. And so I know that I don't want to push Christianity on anyone, but I do appreciate very much that the idea of being a peacemaker is someone who's a disruptor, and I'm committed to disrupting and rebelling against this social construct of racism. Okay, CJ, I see you. I had a cool boss, don't I, y'all? He's pretty cool, So bring your boss next week when you come back. So I challenge everybody here to bring your boss. I'm joking, unless you're the boss. And if you're boss and you can pay me more than CJ, I'll come work for you. Just a joke. But we can't thank you enough for taking the time. And I'm going to tell you how this works. So for the new people here tonight, what we've done is kind of broken this conversation into two big buckets. Bucket number one, we've talked about race, perspective of race, and the ideas that are around that we all bring to the table about race. And then bucket number two is once we work through that, then we get to allyship and activism. And this is, I don't think it's a conversation that's finished. What Bhavani and I are doing is we're engaging people that we don't know across, just across the United States. And we had some people, an international engagement yesterday with the same series of conversations. And we would love to continue this dialogue with you about allyship and activism. And we're committed to getting our technology right to where we can stream. But we also, Brianna's laughing because I've been struggling all day, y'all, struggling. But we want you to continue to be a part of this and bring other people, because if we can have consistent dialogue and we can coexist, then we know that we can restore what's going on in America. So I appreciate y'all tonight. So are there any additional, Bhavani, you got any closing remarks?
Well, I was just telling CJ that you're definitely the boss. Michelle's my sister, and we've been working on this and we'll continue to work on it. And I just want to say I'm so grateful. I feel there are times when I feel completely furious. I'm angry. I think Shawana was saying, people don't see color, and I hear that a lot. But I'm much more, just as everyone here, than just the skin I wear. I want eventually for people to see me as a woman, an activist, an upstander, a mother, an educator, a grandmother of the most gorgeous grandbaby in the whole world. That's what I want to be able to see. And as an immigrant, it's been really hard for me to wrap my heart is torn into a million pieces. But as fast as it's torn, it also heals. And it heals because of people like you guys in my world. And Michelle will tell you, she's worked with me in my nonprofit and as Karen and Jen. Once I grab you guys, there's no escaping. You're in my world and you're in my world to stay. So just a fair warning. We'd love to, I think Michelle and I talked about doing another one next week, right, Michelle? Are you going to talk about that?
Yeah, okay. We're adding another conversation on Tuesday. And we have conversations, we've made them smaller than this one so that we can have more dialogue. But we really pretty much have conversations every day at this point. We have a women in equity conversation on Saturday. This is our first one. So
it's on Sunday.
Oh God, I don't know. I can't keep up.
And we're bringing in my Uganda partner my nonprofit. We work with on gender issues in Uganda. So we're bringing her in. So we'll be seeing some of you guys on Sunday. Anyone else wants to join the gender equity thing on the 13th? Let me know, or let Michelle know.
We want you to come back. So I'm going to just be poignant. CJ, Tammy, and Levi, and Justin, can we expect y'all to come back? Are y'all coming back? Yeah. Is it too late?
I'll take myself off mute to say it. Yep.
Yay! That's awesome.
Awesome. What about Tammy and Karen? Everyone else?
We would love to come back. It would be an honor.
I won't be able to make it next week, but I can make it the week after if we do one then.
Oh yeah. We're doing them every week. We're doing them every day. Come any day of the week. And CJ, you're coming back, right?
I'm still, yeah. No, I'd love to anytime. Whatever you tell me to do, mentor.
Don't believe that. Don't believe that narrative. It's not true. All right. So
It's so true.
All right. Well, we're
I
not.
hear you, CJ.
What'd you say?
I know how Michelle works.
Mm.
I said, I hear CJ.
Well, we're gonna close out tonight. I appreciate y'all. For those of you who we have this kind of like a little virtual after party where we stay on and talk a little bit more, and it's just kind of open. So if you're staying, stay. If you have to go, we appreciate you. And I will follow up with an email. Give me a day or two, because Bhavani works me really hard. So, and CJ, my two bosses work me, and Adrian. All my bosses are on here. I gotta go. I'm gonna hide in the bathroom. All right, y'all. Well, thank you, and we appreciate you so much. Thank you for the new people. We love you.
Thank you.
All right. See you later. All right.